Hey guys, today in this video I will be going over the best and the worst items for patch 10.7, and this tier list is from tftactics.gg. I'm going to leave their website in the description below. It is helpful for beginners, however some of their information is wrong, so I'm going to go over it as I go over all the items and explain when you should be using these items. So the first item here on the S tier list is the Spatula. Now the Spatula builds into many different items, so I'm going to show you another sheet right here, and this sheet right here shows you all the items the Spatula builds into. So basically the Spatula is used for two different types of items. So the first type is the Force of Nature, which you gain one extra team size. If you use two Spatulas, combine them together, you can put an extra champion on the board, which means you get an additional trait perhaps. Let's say you needed a third Dark Star, then you can put Shaco on the board with Force of Nature, or you can just put another useful champion on the board that will help you win battles. So Force of Nature by far is the best item in the game. This item, if you get two Spatulas in any scenario, I would almost just always build it no matter what. There's no other item that I would ever place before double Spatula into Force of Nature. So this item is a must build whenever you get it. Now, the second best Spatula item out of this list is the Demolitionist Charge, and this is built from the Spatula and the Large Rod. The reason why this item is so good is because the ability of Demolitionist is so strong. You get to stun for 1.5 seconds with any spell. So this item is really good on champions with crowd control or AoE, such as Aurelion Sol. His starships will continuously stun as long as you have Aurelion Sol and a Ziggs or a Gangplank. Once the Demolitionist bonus is active, you're going to be constantly stunning your opponents with this item. So making Aurelion Sol into a Demolitionist is super strong, or Vel'Koz Demolitionist, super strong, because Vel'Koz's laser beam just stuns everybody and he just does a ton of damage. So this is the second best Spatula item. And aside from the Demolitionist Charge, however, I think all the other Spatula items are very situational. The Rebel item used to be really good for patch 10.6. However, the Rebels did get a nerf in terms of their strongest champions in this patch. I would still put the Rebel medal as one of the better Spatula items, because most of the other Spatula items I think are very situational, and it is not really known yet if the other ones can perform as well as the Demolitionist Charge or the Rebel item, although the Rebels did get a nerf. So this item, I think the Rebel medal is not really something you must go for nowadays, but the Demolitionist is something that I would go for if you have some kind of comp that will definitely be using this trait somehow, because this ability is super strong. Just being able to stun for 1.5 seconds is huge. And once again, the Force of Nature is the strongest item in this game. Just being able to put someone else on the board is incredibly strong. It's going to give you that advantage throughout the early, mid, late game, depending on whenever you get it. And then the rest of the other Spatula items are situational. So if you need to put an extra Blade Master, go ahead, make the Blade of the Roaring King. Or if you want to put an extra Protector, go ahead and do this. But I would highly advise you to try to avoid the other Spatula items. Once again, if you can get a Demolitionist bonus up on the board, I would just save your Spatula, pick up a Large Rod during Carousel, or wait for the item drop phase and build this item. Or maybe you could also wait out and see if you can get a second Spatula, because that does happen. So I would really try to force the Force of Nature or Demolitionist Charge whenever you get an early Spatula. So that's it for the Spatula items. And just to let you guys know, the tier list is done by letter grades, as you guys can see. So S meaning the best, A is second best, B, C, and then there's D. So you guys get the idea. So the next item we're going to talk about is the Giant Slayer. So the Giant Slayer requires a sword and a bow. And the description on this item is actually wrong. Attacks deal an additional, I believe, 12% and enemy max health as true damage. It's not 9%, so it did actually get a buff in patch 10.6. This item is definitely an S tier item. It's super strong. Definitely really, really good on any snipers, blasters, or even Blade Masters. Any champions that require attack damage and they need to deal just more damage, this item is really good. Also, it's great at dealing with those big brawlers and vanguards because they're tanky, they have a lot of health. So that means if you can do 12% extra damage per hit and ignore that armor, you're good. This item's gonna just do more damage. The next best item we have here is the Guardian Angel, and the Guardian Angel actually only gives you 400 health on revive, not 500, so it actually got a nerf in patch 10.6, and this item is still pretty good. It's very good on tanks, or it's good on very strong carries. So I like to put this item on someone like Jhin or Shaco, because Jhin and Shaco are really strong, and if they die, you actually get an additional Darkstar bonus. And if you guys don't know what Darkstars do, basically if your Darkstar dies, your other Darkstar champions get additional spell power and attack damage. So this item is actually really good on Darkstars, as they're able to revive and then die a second time and give additional bonus. But it allows your strong carries like Shaco and Jhin to survive and fight again, which is really important, because if those two champions, let's say on your Darkstar team, dies very early, then you might end up losing the game, because Jhin and Shaco are just that important for Darkstar teams. The Guardian Angel is also great on any champions that provide really strong crowd control like Gangplank or Cho'Gath. So if Gangplank and Cho'Gath has this item, they're guaranteed to get their ultimate off before they die. At least one ultimate off to crowd control the entire board, which is going to really help out your team win that battle. So this item is just very useful in a lot of scenarios. And then we have Hand of Justice. I do believe that this is a very strong item, but I think I would say this is about an A tier item, just because now the Hand of Justice healing does not scale off ability power. So you just will always get 50 life on hit at the start of the round. So that means that your champion will heal themselves for 50 health points each time they attack, or they'll get 50% more damage. So if you get 50% more damage, this item will be very strong. In most cases, the 50 life on hit is not as good. And as this item got a small adjustment where it doesn't scale with ability power anymore, it's a little bit weaker on some champions, but this item regardless, I think is still very strong. However, I don't think it's an S tier. I'm going to put this as an A tier item. And this item is just great on champions that like to do critical damage or just like to do a ton of damage. Once again, the Hand of Justice is just a strong damage item, and it's just going to be good on snipers, blasters, blade masters, mainly put it on any of those champions, and this item will do great as well. It's going to give you either a ton more damage, or it's going to give you some healing on hit. And then we have Ionic Spark. Once again, the description on this item on this website is wrong. So enemies within 3 hexes have their magic resistance reduced by 50%, so it's not 25%, and it does not stack. So you can stack multiple Ionic Sparks, but you'll only get the magic resist reduction just once, and then when your opponents cast a spell, they are zapped, taking magic damage equal to 20% of their max mana. That's wrong as well. It's actually 225% of their max mana. So your opponents within 3 hexes will take a lot of damage if they cast a spell, and their magic resistance is reduced by 50%. So this item is great on your tanky front line, or anyone in the front. Any champion in the front should ideally have this item. You don't want to put this item in your back row, because if you put it in the back row, it's not going to hit any of the opponent champions, as this only has a radius of 3 hexes. So you will always want to put Ionic Spark in the front. So if you put it on a tank, or if you put it on brawlers, right? If you put it on a Vi, for example, in a cybernetic comp, it's great, because Vi actually, for example, her ability, she can also dash to the back line. Her assault and battery hits the last guy, so that means you're going to hit everybody with the Ionic Spark. Not just the front enemy units, but you'll also hit the back enemy units, meaning that you're going to be zapping almost everybody on the board. Not only that, but if you went for a cybernetic comp, this single item will give Vi, for example, or Leona, who's also another tank in the front, it will give them extra health bonus and attack damage. So Ionic Spark is a great item for cybernetics. It's great for any comp with a front line. Most comps do have a front line. You could put it on a Vanguard as well. And this item is great. However, I do not think this is an S tier item. It's not a must go. I don't think this item is that strong, so I would put it at an A level. It is a very good item on tanks, and it's also good on mech pilots. If you do put this on your Rumble or your Annie, your mech pilot will reduce the opponent's front line's magic resistance by 50%, so they will die faster to, let's say, a mech pilot sorcerer comp or a mech pilot infiltrator comp. They do a lot of magic damage, so Ionic Spark can also help out in those situations as well. But however, I think this is an A tier item, not an S tier. The next item we have is the Morellos, and the Morello actually got a nerf in this patch, so spells deal burn damage equal to 27% of the enemy's maximum health over 10 seconds and prevent healing. This item is very strong because the spells of your champion that have this item on will burn the enemy's health for 10 seconds, and it will prevent healing. Healing is a big mechanic in this game. Also, Celestials is a thing, so Celestials, they like to heal their whole team. You also have Mystic healers like Sona and Soraka, so all of their healing will be cut down. It will prevent healing for a bit. It's going to reduce the healing effect. So the Morellos actually just has a great utility on your team. You can burn your opponent's health for 10 seconds, and you can prevent healing, so they're going to die faster. It's also a great counter to Protector Xin Zhao comps, although I think that comp is not as popular anymore after the Xin Zhao nerfs and the Mystic nerf as well. So this is a great counter item to any comps that rely on healing and that rely on big health. So this item is just really good, and I do think even with the nerf, it's still a super strong item, and it's a great item to have on any champions that use ability power, which is pretty much any champion in the game. So this item is great on Echo, it's great on Sorcerers, it's great on Infiltrators, and so on. The next item we have is the equivalent to the Morellos, but it's more for auto attackers. So the Morellos is for ability power spellcasters like Echo. The red buff, this item can also go on Echo as well because of his ability. However, you wouldn't use the red buff on someone like Vel'Koz or any of the sorcerers. Sorcerers, if you want to burn and have the same effect, you're going to be using Morellos. The red buff is more for auto attack champions like brawlers, blasters, right? Anybody who uses attack damage. Blade Masters are really good with this item because they apply more on-hit effects. Attacks deal 27% of the enemy's maximum health as burn damage over 10 seconds and prevent healing. So red buff and Morellos are pretty much exactly the same thing. Just keep in mind that the red buff is used on attack damage champions like blasters and blade masters and snipers, while Morellos is used for ability power casting champions and sorcerers. So they do the same thing. They're very strong, but just know that you want to build these items situationally. Now the next one we have is the Seraph's Embrace. This item just gives you 40 mana at the start of a turn. When your champion casts a spell, that champion restores 20 mana. And this item is just really good on champions with low mana cost. That's the first thing I want to point out. For example, someone like in a 6 sorcerer comp, if you had a Syndra, this item is really good on her because Syndra has only a 50 mana cost. Or someone like Ziggs. Ziggs has a 45 mana cost, which means in one auto attack for Syndra, 1 or 2 auto attacks for Syndra, she's going to be able to cast her ability, and her ability is really strong. Syndra's ability pretty much kills anybody on the board in one shot if she has a lot of other ability power items on top of this. So the Seraph's Embrace is great on champions with very low mana cost. But now this item has also become sort of the premium item for any champion that want to just get their ultimate or their skill off faster. So you can actually put this item on anybody, really. You can just give this item to Aurelion Sol as well, or Gangplank, or Misfortune. Even though Misfortune and Gangplank, they have a high mana cost, Seraph's Embrace just gives you the initiative and almost guaranteed ult in every fight. You might even get 2 ult off, as you will also restore 20 mana right after you use the skill. This item just is much stronger right now than the other mana regen item called the Spear of Shojin. Some of you guys might know this item. This item will give you 18% max mana per attack after your champion casts a spell, and there's a requirement for this item, and that's why the Spear of Shojin right now is not as good as the Seraph, because the Spear of Shojin does not really activate at all until your champion casts a spell. You can put Spear of Shojin and Seraph together to get instant casts and get more casts off, because the Spear of Shojin is great at giving you a lot of mana once after you cast a spell. So you'll get 18% mana per attack after you cast a spell, but it does not give you the initiative. It does not let you cast a spell immediately as quickly as you would want your champion to, like something like the Seraph Embrace would do, because this item just gives you 40 mana right off the start. So that's just good on almost every champion, but it's best on champions that have very low mana costs like Syndra and Ziggs. So just keep that in mind. But however, this item I think is just a really strong premier item on any champion that loves using their abilities, Aurelion Sol being one of them as well. Gangplank, Misfortune, they could all be using it. Echo could be using this as well, regardless of their mana cost. Just being able to have that initiative and just casting off a spell much faster than everyone else with their strong ability is going to turn around some of those games and may let you win. And the final item here on the S tier list is the Zephyr. On the start of combat, banish an enemy for 5 seconds. This item got a nerf, so they didn't update this as well. So it's not 7 seconds anymore, it's 5 seconds. If this was a 7-second removal, I would say this is an A tier item. I believe the Zephyr is more of an A or a B tier item, depending on who you target with this item, and it can be very tricky. I may make an advanced tactics video on how you can try to target the right enemy champions with the Zephyr, but basically your champion that's holding this item will take out another champion from your enemy side of the board that's on the exact same hex on the opposite side. So it's going to take them out for 5 seconds so they can't fight. If you hit the enemy carry with the Zephyr, your team may be able to clear his whole team by removing him for the first 5 seconds. That can make a very big impact. However, if you hit someone that is insignificant to the enemy's team, this item actually basically does nothing. So I think this item is an A tier if you hit someone correctly on the opposite side, someone very important to his team. But if you don't hit it, then it's more like a B or a C tier. It might help you win, it might do nothing. So it's kind of a hit and miss. You are spending 2 items to build this. So this item is a high risk, high reward item. But in general, if you know who to target, this item can be very good. So I may make a video on in the future about how you can use the Zephyr effectively if you guys would like. Let's look at the A tier list next. And the first 3 items we have are the Sword, Chain Vest, and Large Rod, and these 3 items are the strongest individual items in the game that you can pick up in the shared carousel phase that builds into the strong items that are in the S tier here. And once again, I don't think all of these are S tier, like the Ionic Spark or the Zephyr. There I do have some disagreements, but the other ones I think do deserve an A tier, S tier spot. But these 3 items are the best items that you can pick up in the shared carousel. So right now, Giant Spelt and the Negatron Cloak aren't performing so well. The items that build from the Giant Spell and Negatron Cloak, most of those items aren't so good. That's why they do not make the A tier spot here. And you can see the Negatron Cloak is on the B tier, while the Giant Spell is on the C tier. So this just essentially is telling us right now the strongest items are built from these 3 items. And I would highly recommend you guys to pick one of these 3 items whenever you're choosing an item in the shared carousel phase. And the next item they have here is the Death Blade. The Death Blade, whenever the wearer kills or participates in killing an enemy, gain 15 extra attack damage for the remainder of combat, starts at 1 stack. So you start with plus 15 damage right off the bat, but when your champion kills or participates in killing another champion, you get an additional 15 attack, and so on. So the stack will go on and on until the battle ends or until that champion dies. So your champion will just get more attack damage as the turn goes. Snipers, blasters, blade masters, those are champions that will use the Death Blade pretty well. Anybody who requires a lot of attack damage, this item will give you more damage. However, I'm not exactly sure if it deserves the A spot. It's an item that I usually tend to avoid. I don't build this item in most cases. I've almost never built this item. I've only built this item if I had enough swords to go for it. So I would actually put this item more as a B plus item. It is okay, but I just don't think it deserves the A spot, A tier list, because I almost never see myself using this. And also, swords are really precious. With a sword, if I can go for a Guardian Angel, and if I can go for an Infinity Edge, and that's the next item I'm going to talk about here. But the Infinity Edge, I think, is sort of performing a little bit better than the Death Blade, just because it gives you crit damage. So you get 100% extra crit strike damage, and you also get 20% extra critical strike chance. And crit just means you're going to do double the damage, essentially, to the enemy champions. And I think just doing double the damage and having an extra 20% chance to double the damage on your opponents is just better than having stacks of attack damage. So I think Deathblade is more of a B tier item, at best maybe B plus. The items that I like to go for with the sword, you know, it's normally the Guardian Angel or the Infinity Edge. I think the Infinity Edge definitely deserves the A tier. This item I think may be an S tier as well, but it is countered by this one right here called the Bramble Vest. And we do see this item often on tanks or on vanguards, and the Bramble Vest totally negates all critical hits, and it can be very strong on the Protector 3-star Xin Zhao comp, and that Xin Zhao just takes no crit damage at all. So the Infinity Edge basically is useless against this item. So that's really what's holding back the Infinity Edge, is that it is countered by something like the Bramble Vest, or sometimes even it doesn't do enough damage against 4 vanguards. But even then, the Deathblade doesn't do that much damage against 4 vanguards either, because you need to have armor penetration if you want to do more damage against them, or you're going to need to do maybe true health damage like Giant Slayer. Giant Slayer is more of an effective item to take down vanguards than something like the Deathblade or Infinity Edge without armor penetration. But I think Infinity Edge is a very strong item, and it definitely deserves the A tier spot, because for me, just doing double the damage, most of the other champions in the game that can't take that much damage will die much quickly to this item. And this item is great on someone like Shaco, who does extra crit damage. If you build 1 Infinity Edge or 2 Infinity Edge on him, he's going to be killing any champions that are defenseless in like 1 shot, because critical strike damage just gives you so much more damage. It's just essentially giving you double the damage per hit. And it's also good on snipers like Jin, or blasters as well. It's great on Blade Masters. They're going to be doing more damage. If Irelia has this on her, she might be able to kill a lot of champions in like 1 shot. So this item is pretty strong right now. And if you can stack 2 Infinity Edges, you're going to see like a full crit build going on. So your opponents better have something like a Bramble Vest to counter this. The other item I want to talk about that we missed here is the Dragon's Claw, which is also on the A tier here. You gain 50% resistance to magic damage. I think this is too high on the list. This item is situational. It's not all that effective on every single champion. The most effective use I've seen this item on is Xin Zhao. Yeah, I've only seen Xin Zhao using this item effectively. Dragon's Claw making Xin Zhao really difficult to kill. So the 3-star Xin Zhao just goes on and kills everybody on the board with his Protector team. But aside from Xin Zhao, I haven't seen any other champion using this so effectively where I had a problem to counter with. This item is great against sorcerers, but aside from sorcerers and other ability cast users, you know, it doesn't give you additional defense against, like, you know, attack damage champions like Jin or Shaco or anything like that. They're still going to do a ton of damage. They're going to cut through Dragon's Claw. To me, this is a situational item, and it might be really good against sorcerer comps or caster comps, any other caster comps like Rebels. If they are a problem, then this item could be really strong. But I think with all the changes in patch 10.7 and sorcerers still not being that great so far, I don't see this item as an A tier. This is situational. I'm going to put it at B or C tier. So I would never rush this item right away. I would be patient and see if there are better items you can build with the Negatron Cloak. The next one we have here is the Jeweled Gauntlet. The Jeweled Gauntlet gives you spell crit whenever you cast a spell. I think the Jeweled Gauntlet is more of a B tier item once again. I found this item to be situational. I think the Jeweled Gauntlet, while it does give you the spell crit, I have found this item to be performing underwhelmingly so far. It hasn't impressed me to the point of Morelos. Morelos definitely, I think, is a must-build item, because this item just counters a lot of healing builds or any tanky builds. A lot of comps use some tanks here and there, which is really nice. But the Jeweled Gauntlet, to me, was underperforming. I've used this in Sorcerer comps. I've used it on Misfortune, any other casters, you know, that like to use their ability power to do damage. I just haven't found this item to be super effective. I think it's more of a B+. It might be borderline A, maybe an A- item, but it's situational once again. The next one we have here is the Thieves Glove, and this builds from 2 gloves. You make 2 random items. This item does definitely have some uses throughout the game. However, the gloves are quite important in building some stronger items like the Infinity Edge. I do really like the Infinity Edge right now, but if you never get a sword, I guess the Thieves Glove is kind of what I would go for as well. So this item I think deserves the A tier because it is very useful. It has a lot of utility. You can just kind of throw this on any champion, it's gonna work. So I think that's why it's an A tier for me. And the final item in the A tier list we have is the Titan's Resolve. When the wearer is hit or inflicts a critical strike, they gain a 2% stacking damage bonus up to 100%. At 50 stacks, the wearer gains 25 armor and magic resistance and increases in size. However, I think this item isn't game breaking or meta breaking for it to be in the A tier list. I think this item is very average. Once again, you only really build it on tanks, and your carries have really no use for this item, and your carries are the ones that are going to carry you in the game. So this item, I'm going to put it in the B tier list. I don't agree with this being on the A tier. And then for the B tier list item, Negatron Cloak, we talked about this. So this is not a high priority item. Most of the items this builds into are average. That's all it's saying. And the bow and the glove as well, they are also on the B tier list. And I do agree with this. The bow and the glove, while they do build into some strong A tier items, they really need any of these ones right here, the sword or large rod, to build into something much stronger. So the Negatron Cloak, bow, and glove are second priority items in the shared carousel, while the Giant's Belt is the worst one. So this is the item I would probably not choose first in the shared carousel unless I wanted to build something like Morelos or Red Buff, because those two items are really good. But aside from those two items, if you had to choose anything else aside from the sword or the large rod, then go for the bow or the glove. These are the next kind of best items to pick from in the shared carousel. So the first item we have here is the Bloodthirster, and the description on this item is wrong. Attacks heal for 35% of damage, so it's not 50%, it's 35%. At first I liked using this item, but then I realized that this item is very situational, and it wasn't as effective as I wanted it to be. It was actually worse than something like the Hand of Justice for healing. I found the Hand of Justice healing to be more effective in a lot of the cases. The Bloodthirster is very strong on champions that do a lot of damage, like a lot. So someone like Jin or Shaco that does a lot of damage with Darkstar stacks will have use for this item. So for most champions, I find the Bloodthirster to be lackluster. However, if I have to build it, I will. And it is an average item. It's not terrible, so I think it does deserve the B tier list here. And then the next one we have is Bramble Vest. This item will negate critical strikes, so it will counter Jeweled Gauntlet and the Infinity Edge. So this item is very strong on champions that take very little damage in the first place, like Vanguards. Tanks are really good with this item. They can survive for a super long time. Mech Pilots are good with this as well, because Mech Pilots are also tanks. And they just don't take crit, so they survive for a really long time. And you also deal additional magic damage to all nearby enemies, up to 200 if your champion is a 3-star. So it's a really good tanky item. For me, this is like an S tier item for tanks, but since your carries are going to carry your team, you don't really prioritize your tanks first when you build items. That's why this is more of a B tier item, because you build a Bramble Vest if you kind of have to. If you have no other carry items to build, then you build this item. But it is a very strong item. It's an S tier item for tanks, but for carries, obviously this item isn't going to do much. And the next one we have here is the Guinsoo's Rageblade. The Guinsoo's Rageblade gives you 5% attack speed per attack, and it stacks infinitely. So it just keeps giving you more attack speed as your champion attacks. It's great on Blade Masters, so if they want to continuously attack without stopping, it's great for them. It's great for snipers, great for blasters as well. So any champions that continuously like to attack, someone like Jinx, Jin, Kayle, Xayah, any of those Blade Masters that like to continuously attack will have great use with this item. But it's an average item because most of your champions that with this item, most likely they won't get to 5.0 attack speed, which is the max attack speed in the game. They'll usually end up getting maybe 2 to 3.0 attack speed before they die. So this item is pretty average. It doesn't give you a ton of attack speed from the start. They have to start stacking it, and they have to survive for a long time for this item to have super effective use at the end. So this is an average item. And we have the Last Whisper here as well. Critical hits reduce the target's armor by 90% for 3 seconds. This effect does not stack. So the Last Whisper is a great item to build with the Infinity Edge, as you can reduce armor by 90%. So if you apply crit with the Infinity Edge, then your champion will reduce their armor by 90%. It makes killing tanky champions like Vanguards and Brawlers much easier with the Last Whisper. I find this item to be really, really strong with Infinity Edge. However, if you do not have an Infinity Edge, I would never build this item first. You don't rush the Last Whisper first because you need to have some crit. If you do have a Hand of Justice, which gives you some additional crit, I guess you could build a Last Whisper on top of it, but I would never rush the Last Whisper without having a crit item in the first place. The more crit you have, the more effective this item will be. If you don't have a high crit chance on your champion, then the Last Whisper's effect will almost never proc. So you want to have something like Infinity Edge or Hand of Justice first before you build this item, and put both of those items, the Infinity Edge and the Last Whisper, on the same champion, such as Jhin, and you're going to see Jhin just reducing armor a lot on a lot of the enemy champions, killing Vanguards very quickly. So I think this item is very good when it's paired with another crit strike, high crit strike chance item, but definitely Infinity Edge is the item you want to have before you build this item. Next, we have the Locket of the Iron Solari. Shields allies within 2x's in the same row for up to 350 shield. That's if you get a 3-star champion to hold it, then you'll get up to 350 shield. And how this item works is if your champion with the shield is standing in the middle and you have two champions on the left and two champions on the left, and two champions on the right of that middle champion, all those 5 champions will get the shield depending on the champion's level that's holding this item. You get up to 350 shield. It's a really good item to have in the early to mid game, as the shield actually gives you sort of like an extra health point for all your champions, and the extra health points can really help you survive some of those early rounds. This item does fall off in the late game, however, as the extra shield doesn't really matter anymore by the time you're in the late game. But in the early to mid game, the extra shield will really help your champion survive for a lot longer, which means you can win more fights with the extra health points that you gain from the shield. But this item I like to use mainly on any comps that have a kind of a front line, have more front line than the back line, or use it on an infiltrator comp, because infiltrators love to get some shield as they have very weak health points and they can survive longer with some extra shielding when they jump to the back. And I do think this is a B tier item, so this is in the right spot. The next one we have is the Rabadon's Death Cap, where spell power stat is amplified by 50%. So you just get a ton more ability power damage. I think the Rabadon's Death Cap and the Jewel Gauntlet are on the same tier. If you had to choose between this or this, I might even just build this first, and then if I had another large rod, I would build a Jewel Gauntlet on top of it. So at least if you have a ton of spell power and then it can crit, you'll do even more damage. But if you were to just crit, you might not do as much damage as you would want it to be. For me, the Rabadon's Death Cap is pretty good, and I don't think the Jewel Gauntlet is like any better than this item. The Jewel Gauntlet is better than the Rabadon's Death Cap on certain champions, but once again, I think the Rabadon's Death Cap is pretty good. It just gives you a ton of spell power, which is just great on any spellcaster champions. Also, sorcerers are really good with this item as well. Like Vel'Koz and Syndra can use this item very effectively. Gangplank will use this item effectively as well. He'll do a ton of damage. So will Aurelion Sol. So Rabadon's Death Cap is just a really good item for any spellcasters. The next one we have is the Runon's Hurricane. Basic attack fire an additional missile at another nearby enemy, dealing 60%. It's actually dealing 70%, so it did get a buff. 70% of the wearer's attack damage and applying on-hit effects. So this item will allow your champion to attack basically 2 champions at the same time. Normally your champion would attack just 1 champion, but you're attacking 2 champions at the same time. And while your champion attacks 2 champions, they both get applied with on-hit effects. And what are on-hit effects? On-hit effects are secondary effects like red buff. So you'll apply burn on 2 champions at the same time, or the Giant Slayer. You'll apply true damage to 2 champions at the same time. So I love pairing the Runon's Hurricane with the Giant Slayer and the red buff, as I'm applying these 2 strong on-hit effects at the same time to 2 champions instead of just 1 champion. So the Runon's Hurricane is great for that. It's great for snipers, brawlers. You could even use it on Blade Masters if you want to put it on KL. She can hit 2 guys at once, so it's pretty nice. The next one we have is the Shroud of Stillness. When combat begins, shoots a beam straight ahead that delays affected enemies' first spell cast, increasing their max mana by 40%. So if the Shroud of Stillness hits your enemy champions, excuse me, their mana will be increased by 40%, which means they can't cast their spell right away. And it's very strong if you actually hit the champions with it. However, this item requires a lot of positioning, like the Zephyr. And the Shroud of Stillness, the width of the Shroud of Stillness is pretty thin, so it doesn't hit a lot of the champions if your opponent's champions are spread out. It's really good on the Rebels, against the Rebels, because Rebels like to bunch up. So if you hit all the Rebels, you're going to hit most of them, which means they can't cast their spells for a while. This item is very situational, and to me, it's a little bit too high on the tier list here. I don't think it deserves a B. It's more of a C tier item. I almost never use this item. I only use this item if I have to because it's so situational. Sometimes you'll just miss. If you miss every single champion on the board, or if you only hit like 2 champions that are insignificant, this item is useless. So I think this is more of a C tier item, and I would never think about building this unless you have to. The next one we have here is the Spear of Shojin. Spear of Shojin, where it gains 18% of its max mana per attack. We talked about this with a Seraph. This item is better on champions that have a higher mana cost. So any champions, let's say with 100 mana and more, this item is great on them because they can gain more mana after they cast their first spell. However, the problem is the champion must cast their first spell before this item has any effect. So sometimes your champion may not even cast their spell and die before this item has any effect at all. And that's why the Seraph is better right now, because the Seraph will almost always give your champion the initiative to cast their spell no matter what before they die. I've almost never had a champion not being able to cast their spell without this item on them. If they have this item on them, regardless of how much mana they have, they will always almost cast their spell before dying at least once. And that's very important for spellcasters. So the Spear of Shojin is a great item on high mana champions after they cast their first spell, but if they don't cast their first spell and they die, I find this item to be not as effective. And I think the Seraph is a better mana item than the Spear of Shojin right now, so I do think this is a B tier item. Still usable, but it definitely isn't super strong. So the next one we have is the Static Shiv. Every third attack deals 80 splash magic damage to 3, 4, 5 additional targets. This item is very good if you can 3-star a champion. However, if you don't have a 3-star champion by the end that is using this item effectively, I think this item isn't as good. I would imagine this item to be more effective on the 1 or the 2 gold champions that are relatively easier to 3-star, like Lucian or Xayah. Those 2 champions like to attack a lot, and they are at the 1 or 2 gold stage. So I would imagine those 2 champions to use this item very well, and if you can stack multiple static shivs on them and they're hitting 5 champions at once, this item could be very strong. But aside from that, I would say this is a B tier item. It might even be a C tier item. It did get a buff from 75 to 80 splash damage, but that's not really a big difference. It's only a 5. We only got an increase of 5 magic damage. This item is also impacted by magic resistance. So the damage does get reduced by any champions with Dragon's Claw or Mystics, and you'll see Mystics in every comp almost right now. Mystics are very popular. So I find this item to be very lackluster by the time you get to the late game. So I would say this item might even be just a C tier. I don't know if it deserves a B tier still, unless we see some huge meta change with the Static Shiv. I never build this item, and in most cases, I would never recommend anyone to rush this item at all. Yeah, I'm going to have to say that this is more of a C tier than a B tier item. Next one we have is the Trap Claw. On combat, gain a spell shield. When it breaks, stun the champion who broke the shield for 4 seconds. So this item is great on tanks. So your tanks who get focused, they will get spell casted immediately, and any of your opponent's carry that attack your tank with their spell, they'll get stunned for 4 seconds, which is huge. However, this item I think is only a C tier item because after the spell shield is broken, it doesn't do anything else. It's a nice item to have, but it's never high priority. It's not even mid priority for me. I never almost build this item unless like I absolutely have to with the final items. So I'm gonna have to put this at the C tier as well. I think this item is pretty lackluster right now. The next one we have is the Warmog's Armor, where it regenerates 5% maximum health per second. So this item is doing somewhat well right now just because of the healing reduction nerfs on the Morellos and the red buff. The biggest problem with the Warmogs was that the Morellos and red buff were very strong before. But as the red buff and Morelos got nerfed 2 times in patch 10.6 and patch 10.7, this item is sort of making a comeback. And this item is very good on tanks. It's good on mech pilots as well. It gives them a lot of health. It's great on vanguards as well and brawlers. And they also get some health regen. So champions with a lot of health, like brawlers and mech pilots, they like this item. This item is very strong on mech pilots. When your mech pilot has like 5,000 health, this item is healing quite a bit with the 5%. So the next one we have here, the last one on the B tier, is the Zeke's Herald. At the start of combat, allies within the same row gain plus 15% attack speed for the rest of combat. This item actually got a buff. It's actually plus 18% attack speed for the rest of the combat. I've used this item a couple times only because I had to, and even then this item was pretty lackluster. The extra 18% attack speed, in my opinion, didn't do very much. This item might be okay in the early game, but it's another item like the Locket that does fall off in the late game and doesn't do very much. I would say this is worse than the Locket just because I think the shield is more valuable than the extra attack speed in most cases, because the shield allows you to survive for a longer time. And I would just never rush this item at all. I would say the Zeke's Herald is a C tier item. I think it's worse than average right now. It's still not that amazing. It might need a buff to 20% extra attack speed because the 18%, it's still not doing very much. I think this item is a C tier. It definitely needs a buff. It doesn't seem that good. And lastly, we have the C and the D tier items. I'm just going to go really quickly on this one. So they put the Giant's Belt and the tier as very low priority items to pick on the carousel. I do agree with this. The tier, I think, is definitely better than the Giant's Belt right now. However, I would definitely not pick any of these items as a first choice in the shared carousel, so that sounds just about right. And then next one we have is Chalice of Favor. Whenever the holder casts a spell, gives all nearby allies 10 mana. It's not 20. It actually got a nerf to 10 mana. This item is pretty bad. It definitely needs a buff. I think the 20 mana was alright, but maybe Riot thought it was a little bit too much. Next one we have is the Hextech Gunblade. Heals for 33% of all damage dealt. I think this got reduced to 25 or 28%. I can't exactly remember, but the problem with this item is that it requires the sword and the large rod. And right now the sword and large rod are the best items in the game. And just using those 2 items to build a very lackluster item is just unforgiving. You just can't waste your sword and large rod to build this. This item is just not that great. So I would definitely say it's very low priority. Only build if you have to, but you have so many more better items to build with a sword and large rod. It would just not make sense for me to build this item at all. And we have Luna's Echo. Spells deal splash damage on hit. Once again, this item is sort of like the Static Shiv. It's pretty good in the early game. Falls off really hard in the late game unless you have a 3-star champion. Really good on Lucian, as Lucian with the 3-star ability. He will get 225 splash damage on hit, but it's very situational. You don't get the 3 stars, and you don't have a champion that casts their spell a lot like Lucian. This item is very situational. It won't be as good. I would say Luna's Echo definitely is something you don't want to rush at all, so it's definitely a C tier. With the Static Shiv should be in C tier as well. And next we have Quicksilver. The wearer is immune to crowd control for only 15 seconds. So it's not permanent crowd control, it's for 15 seconds. And because it's not permanent, this item has fallen off a little bit. Although the first 15 seconds not getting the crowd control is pretty good, it's something that I wouldn't rush. So I would say it's a C tier, maybe a B tier on tanks. I do like this item on mech pilots. Just because if your mech pilots get Zephyred for 5 seconds, that's taking out 3 champions off the board for 5 seconds. That's too huge. So I would say Quicksilver on mech pilots is sort of an A tier, but aside from mech pilots, it's pretty much a C tier for most champions. Rapid Fire Cannon, attack range is doubled. This item is great on melee champions, first of all, that would like to have some extra range. So someone like Irelia would like to have this item because Irelia can get double the range, and she doesn't have to walk up all the way just to hit somebody. Or on Shaco, Shaco can also just hit champions from the back with the Rapid Fire Cannon. However, this item is low priority on most of the other champions. This item is terrible on any of the ranged champions. Ranged champions don't need double the range. This item is mainly for melee carries. Redemption, on crossing below 25% health, healing all nearby allies for 1200 health. This is completely wrong. The redemption now procs when your champion dies. So if your champion with redemption dies, he will heal your entire team for I think 800 health, something like that. It's pretty high, 800 or 1000 health. The problem I have with this item is that when your champion dies with this item, in most cases your other champions are fine. Your other champions are still at full health points. So even, yes, they get the healing, it doesn't do anything because your champions are already at full health. This item is only effective if when your champion dies and the rest of your champions are on low health. Because when they get the healing, they'll fight for a longer time. I really wanted this item to work. However, it's still not working very well, and it's very low priority. It's still kind of very RNG based. If your other champions are at full health, this item won't do much. And you definitely don't put this item on your carries in your backline. You tend to put this on your tanks because your carries wouldn't want to use this item. This item is pretty useless on them. So this is definitely low priority. I would never rush this item. It's definitely one of the worst items in the game. And then we have the ZZ Rot Portal. When the wearer dies, it constructs a ZZ Rot to continue and fight. And this little tank minion that the portal summons will actually taunt your opponent's champions to attack it. Initially, I thought this item was really good, but as time went on, this item turned out to be really useless. The little minion that comes out and fights pretty much just doesn't do much. The damage is way too low on that little guy. It does have a lot of health. It gives you up to 3,000 health if your champion is at 3 stars that's holding this item. However, it just doesn't do anything. It's just like a little bug that's just annoying your opponent's team for a little bit longer, but once they kill that thing, they'll just kill your whole team. So it's just another little bit of annoyance that your opponent has to go through, which is usually not a big deal for them. So this item is definitely low priority. I would definitely not rush this if you don't have to. And then we have the Frozen Heart, Swordbreaker on D tier. I think the C and the D tier honestly can be just grouped together. Or I guess the D tier could be the absolute worst of the worst. But some of the C tier items here honestly should be in D tier as well. So I'm just gonna kind of group them together. They're all very low priority. You don't want to rush any of these items. And I do agree the Frozen Heart is pretty bad. The slowing attack speed for your opponent's front line, it doesn't do very much. Most of the opponent's front line anyways, they don't care about attack speed. Most of them are tanks, and tanks just care about tanking. So if it doesn't hit the back line, it's pretty useless. This item might be good on infiltrators because your infiltrators jump to the back and actually hit the champions that matter. But just hitting the front line, you know, in most cases, because you'll put this, in most cases, if you're not running infiltrators, you're not putting this on the back line, you're putting it on your tanks. It just doesn't do much at all. It's pretty useless. Swordbreaker, attacks have 25% chance to disarm for 3 seconds. It's a crowd control effect that's really good on blasters that do a lot of on-hit effects or blade masters. However, this item isn't performing very well right now. I've had some success here and there with blasters, but aside from blasters, I think this item is definitely very low priority. I would not rush this item, and I think it does deserve the C or the D tier here. But that's it for this video, guys. I've went through pretty much all the items in the game. This is a comprehensive item video. I know it's very long. That's what it's supposed to be. But if you guys want more other guide videos, more specifics about certain items, I can definitely make more videos on those. So give me some feedback in the comments below. And once again, hit that thumbs up, and I'll see you guys next time.